I'm finding it difficult to understand why your finance system is so complex. I'd like to know why that is. I mean, after all, your actual business model isn't that complicated. You send out 72 million letters a year to collect the license fee from those people who haven't paid. Very often they're old people who are being chased. They're quite aggressive letters. It doesn't seem to me that accounting for a monopoly should be that difficult, because your income side of the equation is quite straightforward. It's not like running a contracting business where you've got work in progress, you've got all sorts of variables. Your funding largely comes from the license fee taxpayer, and I accept for the World Service some of it now, and 31% increase last year from the FCDO, and it looks like you're going to get more from the FCDO again this year. That's still taxpayers' money.
Of course.
So that's not money you have to go and earn. That's actually money that comes in, and I accept the fact they haven't agreed it yet, and it's remiss of them not to have done that. But I'm struggling to understand why your finance system is so complicated, because a complicated and opaque finance system means it's very difficult to make good decisions. I think there's a lack of knowledge and understanding of these complex contracts, both within the ministerial departments and also within your department. So, from the point of view of the taxpayer, if the private sector is indulging in very complex contracts which you're signing that aren't fit for purpose, then taxpayer money is going to be wasted massively. So again, I'd like to know, can we have complete transparency of what's in these contracts? When I ask the questions, I get that's a redacted version.
Okay.
So
I think, Rupert, we've got the message.
No, but Jeffrey, it's very important that we've got to have transparency on this if we are to get to the bottom of it. And I don't think we have transparency. And I think we haven't got transparency because very often the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. I've declared my interest as a farmer. I'm an active farmer. And I have to tell you, my experience of DEFRA is a very poor one. And most farmers would agree with me that DEFRA is not fit for purpose. You know, your rule book mutates like a virus. Half the time you shut your schemes within 24 hours because you've got it wrong and everybody's claiming legume fallow in this case. You know, how can an industry that is based on long-term planning, how can they respond when you don't know your own rule book? And the other thing you've got a problem with, in my view, is you can't keep staff for more than a nanosecond. They all disappear, they go. So 1 minute you've got a contact you speak to, the next minute you've got a new temp who doesn't know the rules themselves. So I'm sorry, I really think that rather than giving us a lot of spiel, you know, somebody needs to get their head down and have a plan to sort this out, because farming is a crucial industry to this country. As the Minister knows, our independent rape gang inquiry hearings are ongoing, just a short walk from this chamber. Last week, I sat opposite one woman who was raped by between 600 and 700 men. She estimated that 98% were Pakistani Muslims. The evidence we are collecting is brutal. Again and again, we've been told of failed attempts to traffic raped and abused women overseas to Pakistan and elsewhere. Thankfully, those attempts failed. How many did not? Will the Minister agree to urgently review cases of missing girls in target areas and launch a full state investigation into reports of such trafficking?
Justice Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, the testimony of the victims that the Honourable Gentleman has heard from is absolutely horrifying, and the grooming gang scandal was one of the darkest moments in this country's history. Victims and survivors of these hideous crimes deserve justice, and we will make sure they get it.
So when I read that the culture, let's look at the culture, a lack of trust between counter-fraud and police teams, and noted unclear lines of reporting, duplication and missed investigative opportunities. I then read about siloed working between different teams, inefficiencies and duplication, and relatively few criminal investigations which tend not to be complex or serious. I then go on and I read something that really concerns me. We also found inconsistency in how seriously different parts of the MOD considered and responded to potential misconduct or fraud. Officials and police also told us that some areas of the MOD do not consider fraud to be a major risk and can be reluctant to engage. So I look at this, and I run lots of contracting business. We do lots of procurement. And I just don't think there's any joined-up thinking evident here at all. And you're going to be spending a lot more than you're currently spending. Your whatever it is, 46 billion, is likely to go up to 75 billion. So if these endemic sort of cultural and structural inefficiencies continue, there's going to be more leakage, and therefore more taxes are going to be required on the private sector. So I think this is really very concerning. But if you have a genuine desire to look after the taxpayer, I think you do need to get this lightweight team, which will cost you a lot less than a vast group of people who don't talk to each other. And then you make people fear what happens when they're caught doing something wrong. And as I said earlier, people have to fear that when they get caught doing something wrong, they go to prison. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure your department is fit to be overseeing the delivery of growth. And from everything I've read, I don't think you've accurately defined what you consider growth to be. And if you haven't defined it, given that the regulators, and I read in here that they're engaging with you reluctantly, which is hardly surprising because they've all built up huge little empires that they want to protect. I'm not sure you've got your message. I'm not clear, and I've been in the city for 20 years. I run multiple businesses, and I read these documents. I'm not clear what you define growth as. So I just think it's a bit of a mess, and really you've summed it up by what I would describe as an oxymoron, which is regulating for growth. What I need to understand, if I can, is how are you going to identify the cost and the burden on business, and how are you going to judge success? Because I blame the FCA and the PRA for a lot of the demise of London as a financial centre. I think they have grown far too big. They've replaced the concept of caveat emptor. It's become nanny regulation. It protects basically people who aren't helping. So we've got to get at the answer to this. I think you've got a cultural problem in these organisations, and the key I think the committee would like to understand is how are you going to change that culture? Yeah. I think DWP is deeply flawed culturally. I think HMRC is deeply flawed culturally. How are you going to change that? You're not going to change the outcome. 37 consecutive years? No. It's become ingrained. So I listen in horror, and I built the stadium at Southampton. It's not as big a project as this, but we built it on budget and on time. And the only way we did that was we identified what the design was, what we wanted, and what it was going to cost. And the other thing we did was, which you've got to do in this situation, is you've got to bolt down your downstream risk from variations and changing your mind on the existing plan. So what you need to start with is you need to start, in my opinion, with what do you want to achieve. And then you should be able to relatively straightforwardly cost it. And I listen in horror, you talk about there's boards everywhere. That's a disaster. That means people change their minds. It means you've got to consult. It means you've got to discuss things with people. So I'm confused. I actually think there's a huge danger here. First of all, this issue of ministerial intervention causing delay. And then I read what the Secretary of State says. I think we need to start thinking about transport as a public health intervention as much as an intervention that can stimulate economic growth. So I read that, and I say, Joe, I've seen comments from you, I think, saying, you talk about a plan to drive cultural change, to create healthier communities, to densify, or as I say, cram people into, more dense population around transit routes. And I start to think this is arguably statist intervention rather than actually allowing individuals to travel east-west unfettered in a more effective way so they can pursue their own lives. So is the reason you've delayed this costing because you are embedding other, what I would describe as unacceptable additives into this plan? Either they're not the right people to deliver the project, or the project is wrong and doomed to fail. And it sounds good, it sounds great, like all civil service initiatives. Let's get shared services. Let's get some equivalent to private sector efficiencies. That sounds great, it's a great strapline. But, again, I read the inefficiencies here. Applicant tracking system, ATS, shelved. Shared services portfolio, incomplete. Project ownership, vague. I want to talk about that in a minute. Risk management, patchy. Managing interdependence is concerning. Okay, I'd say impossible. That's my view on that. So another question for you is, how can you deliver efficiency across shared government systems when the entire approach to the project itself is inefficient? I don't understand. I mean, I run lots of private sector businesses. I don't see, and you can give me the verbal baby food, Jerome, but at the end of the day, I want to drill down and know, I want to understand. This has been going on a hell of a long time. A lot of taxpayers' money has been spent on this. Our job is to protect the taxpayer. Yeah. So I'll tell you what I think, and I think you need to think seriously hard about this, all of you, in the interest of the taxpayer, because I can see a lot more money being wasted here. That's what I smell. And I smell the Tower of Babel. And all you're going to find is what they found when they built the Tower of Babel. The oxygen gets thinner, and God doesn't live up there, okay? So I think you haven't got a structure that the private sector would have. I heard talk in the report of you wanting to emulate the private sector and bring everything together, which is what people do when they buy businesses and put them together. But you haven't got the structure to do it. That's quite clear to me. And more importantly, you haven't got any one person who's in charge of this project. Nobody gets fired for not delivering. There's nobody. I can't see who's actually, and if you have a project in a private sector company, somebody's given the job, and if they don't deliver to timelines, they get fired. In my experience of dealing with HMRC, you don't know your own rule book. Your staff turnover is massive, and very often your staff don't understand the rule book either. That's my experience of it. And when you drill down and you see you've got 200 tax manuals totaling 80,000 pages, and the UK tax code is 22,000 pages in 2 volumes, it's hardly surprising. So, and I think if you look at this on the large businesses, when you look at the sort of mauve bar, legal interpretation is a big issue for a lot of these big businesses. So, and in my experience, you've often come at me saying that something is, by your own admission, a grey area, but you're going to raise the tax anyway. And you use your larger covenant effectively. You have the taxpayer behind you. Businesses don't. They actually have to make profits and pay taxes. But you actually, I think, bully people using this wretched rule book, which has got more loose ends than a plate full of spaghetti. And I think here, this is a very, very interesting chart. And even if you look at the light blue, that's error. Well, that's an error because your rule book's so complicated, in my opinion. So why can't you, on burden on businesses, why can't you simplify your own rule book? It's too complicated. The key question, I think, is if you look at what people are saying, this vote splitting, this, oh, you're going to let Andy Burnham in, I think you have to look at what the Labour Party is, at what Keir Starmer is, at what Andy Burnham is, and what an entire front bench are. What they are is a deeply malign Labour Party who has presided over a Fabian agenda, the emblem of which is a wolf in sheep's clothing, which has been designed to undermine the Britain that certainly I know and love, and it has created this welfare situation which is just unsustainable. So I don't see there's any difference whether Burnham gets in, whether he doesn't get in, whether Starmer remains, whether he doesn't remain, whether Wes Streeting gets in. They're all the same. They all disrespect the British people's vote in 2016. They're all rejoiners and remainers because Europe is a petty-minded, socialist, centrally planned, protectionist bloc, and they all want to be part of that. So we broke free from that in 2016. The British people made the right decision. We haven't had it because the establishment didn't want it.